Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 55. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co-host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. So this is our 55th episode, and what we try to do on the show is basically talk about speech-related topics, and also we kind of work around the edges of, since speech is like the basic skills that you need, but it's a skill that you absolutely need it if you want to become happy and successful, and that's something that you'll see today. And Julie's going to go into that in more detail. So we kind of call this show Speech Talk Live. Obviously, we talk about specific speech related issues, but also we sometimes touch around the edges on how this skill you can use for other things, such as how to be successful at work, in business, and even in personal life, and kind of get more out of your life if you have this skill. So that's what we try to do on the show. So one of the things that Julie and I are both mentors for the Coursera course, Introduction to Public Speaking. And we've been doing this now for, I would guess, more than close to 2 years now. And we try to help people on the forum, but also there are people that are outside the Coursera community. So even though we're affiliated with Coursera, whatever we're doing here, I mean, we would like everybody to take the course because we think it's an excellent course and you can learn a lot. But some people don't have the time and they want to learn, or some people may already finish the course, but they want to continue their learning. And we're hoping that through the show that they're learning some new tips and techniques, and hopefully we can work with each other so that we can learn from you, you can learn from us. And what we try to do on the show is answer questions, some of the topics that we think are relevant, that are current, that can help us all learn how to improve our public speaking. So today we have two segments. The first segment, Julie's going to facilitate that, and she has she started a video series where she talks about how to become healthy, happy, and successful. And today she is going to discuss the videos that she's recorded and kind of summarize them on how to develop your bio for your identity. And that's very fundamental, kind of foundational, because once you have that, then you can take it for different situations and maybe make some slight tweaks, whether it's for professional, organization, etc. So this is like your personal bio. Like, who are you? If you have to, and Julie uses herself as an example. I'll let her go into that when she is doing that segment. In the second segment, I've recorded a video and I'm going to facilitate that. And this again comes back to one of my favorite topic. It has to do with feedback. And this one is a little bit different. This is where the last week's show, we talked about self-feedback. This one is more about what if you have to give feedback? How do you do it? Because if we're always asked to give a feedback, and I look at two different cases, and I say that feedback is very tricky, and I would like to go into that more in detail and also get Julie's input into that. So that's the show for today. And at this point, I would like Julie to do her introduction, and then we'll move on to the 90-minute speech segment portion of this show. So Julie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Jay and everybody. Thank you so much. My name is Julie Wu Finkelstein. And yes, my current series of topics is about success. In fact, it's about creating a bio for branding purposes. And yes, this is a public speaking show. And I'm here to practice public speaking. So in any segment I do, I know Jay will give me feedback on how I'm presenting the topic. You cannot speak of nothing, so you have to say something. So this is the topic I'm choosing to practice speaking on. And my goal here is my fundamental orientation is that in order to have a happy and harmonious human existence, there's three factors: health, happiness, and success. And so out of that, I'm working on the success leg. Of course, they are intimately related to health and happiness. And part of the success is to know who we are and to demonstrate that and to live in accordance with who we think we are. So that's the relationship between identity, bio, and branding. So with that, I turn it back to you. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, I definitely looking forward to your segment because I think it was really well done. And for those who are watching this, I will include the links to the videos that she's recorded. And she records them in short videos, which I think is quite effective. In fact, that's what people usually recommend, that if you have short videos, people are more likely to view them. So you can view all three of them or even the first one if you do. And they're short, so you can view all of them. So at this point, what we do is part of our practice is to try to talk about something about public speaking or anything for 90 seconds. So I'm going to talk about something that just happened recently that everybody's talking about, and it has to do with this speech that Donald Trump's wife gave at the Republican National Convention on Monday. And later it was discovered that there were some portions of it that were basically taken directly from Michelle Obama's speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2008. And this is a highly controversial because it's unacceptable. You don't take people without giving them a credit. So people are talking about like who's responsible for it, who's the person who should get fired. And I was thinking about this, and I said, you know what, the person who's really responsible for this is the person who's giving the speech. She's the one who's out there. It's a high stakes situation. You have to be involved when you're giving a speech. Now, you have to sound like who you are. You can't just outsource your speech to somebody and say, hey, I don't have the time, I don't have the skills, can you just write it? You can get help, but you have to be directly involved in the process. And when you're not involved in the process, this is what happens. Somebody said, hey, there are these good quotes, a good aspect of Michelle Obama's speech, and they just basically cut and pasted it into her speech. And let's face it, she looked like a fool for giving that speech because it's her face that's put next to Michelle Obama, and it looks identical to what she's saying. And this is a lesson for all of us. When you're working on a speech, don't outsource it. Be involved, and it has to sound like you. It has to think like you. And if you need feedback, that's perfectly okay. Get feedback from people and consider it. But do not outsource your speech because you're the one who's going to be on the stage giving that speech. People are going to look at you. You're the one who's going to be accountable for that speech. You can't then say, oh my God, it was my speechwriter. It was my speechwriter who screwed it up. It's not going to work. So I think that's a big lesson for all of us. And it comes at a very high stakes situation like this. And I just wanted to kind of bring that up, that when you have to write a speech, when you have to give a speech, you're responsible for everything. Because at the end, it's you on the stage. Julie? You're muted. Okay.
Thanks, Jay. That was a lot of fun, the whole event. I would just say, Marshall McLuhan says, the media is the message. So maybe they want her to be next to Michelle so that subconsciously we get the message that they are peers, they're parallels. So maybe it's all a conspiracy for us to tap into our subconscious mind. Today, you and I had a little incident that I really appreciate us going through. And so I wrote a little article about it on my Facebook. And so it's about project management, project agreement. And I think that project agreement is something that we must do. As you know, we recently kicked off a project that involves a potential of a client in working with her identity and her branding through the deliverables being two of them. One is a solo video and two is an interview segment. And I had written a project agreement. And And then during the discussion, as you know, the discussion went towards strategic positioning, which was actually really wonderful because this was a pilot. And I thought the subject matter really enriched the deliverable that we're going to deliver and increase the enthusiasm level of the client. However, it did create some frustration for you and a bit of chaos for the meeting. And I think that was my mistake. I should have first of all make sure we all discussed and signed off on the project agreement instead of saying, "Oh, let it slip." And then I didn't take control of the scope creep. So this is my way of taking ownership of that and say, in any project we do, even if it's a 10-minute project, we need to take time to have an agreement. And the agreement components include who is doing what is the deliverable, how long it's going to take, and how much time. So it may take a month, but it might only take an hour a week. And then finally, what benefits each of us expect to get from it. And then with the understanding that there will be a project management of scope. So any kind of change in scope, we need further consensus. And finally, money. I think even if there is no money involved, for me as a personal discipline, I need to say we're doing it not a money exchange, but we still have benefits and rewards exchange. Because in any activity, there should be an exchange of rewards and benefits, and there's always an exchange of energy. So to recap, always have a project agreement, always take the time to have everybody sign off on that, even if it's just verbally, and then manage to the scope. And I think that will help us all become better project managers and better at getting things done and maintaining relationships. In this case, you're very forgiving, and we have both agreed that we are piloting and experimenting, and so there was no relationship impact. But in situations of chaos, relationships can be impacted as well. So keep to the project agreement. Thanks, Jay.
I'm done with you, Julie.
I know. Especially since I'm making it so public, right?
I think this is a very important point you just made. That a lot of times I don't think there was a mistake, because what happens is that in one sense you're doing something which is really good. You're taking an initiative. Okay, so there is a positive there. And you are passionate about, so there's a lot of attributes that are really positive that you want to do, but because you get so much ahead, you're really pushing forward, that sometimes you tend to forget that, hey, I need to bring other people along with it. And that's what happens sometimes, that when you get too excited about something, you got to step back and say, hey, are other people also seeing it the same way? Because sometimes you may have to say, okay, I may need to slow down a little bit so that other people can catch up. And what happens a lot of times is we all have so many other things we're doing. We're trying to juggle so many things that we think like everybody's on board. Everybody's going to see it the way I'm seeing it. And that's just not the case. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that you need an agreement. The question is, do people have time to do that? And that's the thing, right? This is a time element, but I think this has to be done. Otherwise, what can happen, like you said, you could end up wasting a lot of time, and it could also affect a relationship, because then if your expectations aren't clear, then you think that I stepped on you, you stepped on me, and there again, you're wasting more time, and then it escalates to the point that instead of you could have mitigated all that if you had done it the right way the first time. Okay, so I definitely agree with that this is something that I need to start doing, and I'd like to take a look at that article that you've written.
Okay, I'll email it to you. Thanks.
Yeah, all the steps, and if I can see there's some things more I can add, I'll let you know, because I think it's something I should adopt as part of my best practice, not just working with you, but working with anybody, because now that I'm working on my book, I have to deal with different people. And I didn't do that with that consultant that I worked with. And it didn't turn out to be a good experience. And I think it could have been much more fruitful if I had done it up front. Because I just recently was talking to another person with the book, and I immediately just realized that this just wasn't a good fit rather than going too deep into it. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to take a brief pause, and then we'll move on to our first segment. Hello, welcome back to Speech Talk Live, episode number 55. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. And in this first segment, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, but I'll just make some remarks before I do that. This one is a video series that Julie has started a couple of weeks ago, where she's trying to develop some sort of a methodology where you come up with your bio or developing your identity. And one of the first things that you have to do is to develop your bio. Who exactly are you? Are kind of like the foundation, because unless you have this, it'll be much easier to remain consistent, right? Consistency is very important. So that if you go to a business situation or a social situation or organizational within an organizational, you're not like suddenly tossed around by not knowing who you are. You have your like your true north or something, right? You know exactly who you are. You don't have to suddenly say, oh, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. You know exactly what your focus is, and you're not going to be tossed around like a rag doll with people come up with all sorts of ideas and things that they want to do. You know what your core values are, interests are, and all these things are. And that's the exercise that Julie has worked on, and it's something that we can all learn from. So rather than me keep talking about it, I'll let Julie take over and explain what this is and what exactly how she has developed her own bio using this technique. So, Julie, why don't you take it over and tell us exactly your video series, what you're trying to accomplish with that, and specifically this week's videos that you have recorded on trying to develop your bio.
Thanks, Jay. Good morning. Yes, so somewhere in my work of health, happiness, and success, I decided that it's really important to know who you are, who we are as a person. Most of the times in this society, there's such a trashing of the ego, kill the ego. The ego is bad. And then if you go deeper into some spiritual processes, they want to kill the self, right? The self being more than the ego. If you look at the Freud's term, there is the ego, the id, and the superego. Okay, and then Jung has the unconscious, the conscious, the unconscious, and the collective consciousness. So, of course, in Buddhism, there's a self and the no self, or the big self. But the truth is we are human beings and we live a human existence. So to be healthy, happy, and successful, we really need to be knowing who we are. Now, we're not perfect and we're not exactly what we want. But having a clear image of who we are is the beginning of being able to be successful. To have an identity is that self that you relate to, but because we're unconscious, it's bigger than that. And then the bio is really who we want to present to ourselves. Now, each of us have undergarment and outer garment. When we go out to the world, we don't show people our undergarment, but we know we're wearing them. Okay, so the bio is our outer garment, it's how we present ourselves. And so it's not everything, but there are some things that you don't change, and the inner and the outer should be consistent. So I have come up with a methodology that helps us to not only figure out who you are, but to move from who you are into how you want to present. And it's very important because, as you said, we play different roles, we have different responsibilities, but we're still the same person. And I think there's 4 attributes that helps us maintain the consistency as we move from different roles and different contexts of relationship. And those are our passions, our talents, our experiences, and skills, and our core values. Okay, so what I think to create an effective bio is to really make that visible to ourselves. So that last week I promised somebody a worksheet, and that I have a worksheet, and that's basically based on those 4 key attributes and connecting with what you do. Now, the what you do part is different, because if you're looking for a relationship and you're going to match.com, the part of what you do is different than if you're looking to set up a business. Okay, but nevertheless, the passion, the skills, the talents, and the core values remains relatively stable. You may highlight one and not the other. Um, so basically, I took your idea of, okay, so as an underlying concept, the other thing that's really key is the world is changing a lot, right? I think the average person now have about eight different jobs in a lifetime. When you and I were coming into the work stream, I think we expect to have one job for life, maybe 2 the most. So the world is becoming much more fluid, and there's less permanence. And the other thing is connections can be very brief and also very distant. Like, I got to know you, uh, couldn't have done it without the internet. So put that 10 years ago, but maybe even more like 3 or 5 years ago, because there's Hangout on Air, there's WebEx, there's a Shindig. There's so many different tools for us to connect across the world. But that means people make images, make impressions of us. They have an impression of us the minute they turn on the video screen. Okay. The paradox is, but they only trust people. They can only have a relationship when there's trust. So the question is, I like the word you use, incremental. There's a lot of little blips along the way that creates a long-lasting potential relationship. So you want to send the same packet of message. You want to create the same impression every time. You don't want to be giddy one day and spacey another day and become super managerial, because it's disorienting for the person receiving your messages. So the creating a bio and living in accordance with that bio create a sense of consistency in a very fluid and chaotic world. So the way I think it's done, that using your hack technique, is 4 key attributes, and then an envelope question in the beginning, the same question at the beginning and the end. So I actually ended up with the sandwich technique. So you start off with, what do you do, or what do you want to do? And I suggest people to say, fake it till you make it, put in what you really want to do, exaggerate a bit. Imagine a year from now, that's who you are. And then, what are your passions? What's your talent? What's your experience and skill set? And what's core value? And come back relating back into what you're doing or what you want to do, and how you can service the people you want to engage in that relationship. Setting up what you want to do and what you do kind of gives you the if we use a sports metaphor, it puts you in the field. It puts you in the field. And then going through the 4, it takes you through the bases. And then the last question takes you home. Now, you have, in our discussions, you suggested that I focus on a couple of points, which I'll add. One is that this is a living thing, so you don't want to make sure it's perfect. It's never perfect, but just to do it and to have it will start focusing your life. Each of us have so many distractions. I just talked to this woman this morning. She says She didn't even say she couldn't focus. What she said was she's vague. She doesn't even know what she can focus on. So her life is a failure because there's no concentration of energy, and she's going to get fired. So having this helps to create focus, like I said, the North Star. The second thing is that this is a serious topic, but that doesn't mean that you should get stuck. It means that you do the best you can and keep on us using, again, your word, incrementally improve. Do it every so often. One more thing I like to say is find an action partner. I have you as my action partner on this project, and I have two other people. One is to help me surface my identity. She knows me really well, to identify my gifts and talents. Another one's an English teacher. She will make sure that she's also a very good friend I've known for 20 years. So she's doing a two-level edit for me. The first edit is, does it really reflect who I am? So kind of like a quality test, a QA. And then she's going back to do the copy editing, the grammar. So you really do need a team to support you, first of all, emotionally and vision, understand you. And you need someone who's a wordsmith to help you hone. For me, anyways, because I'm not a great wordsmith, but I think for anybody, because it's so intimate with oneself, I think it's really better to have someone else. It's almost like you're paddling the boat, and you just have one oar because it's about yourself. So having someone there keeps you from going in circles. So I think it's really important to find someone to work with on this one because it's so personal and intimate. It's hard for us to see ourselves, right? Because we need a mirror. So those are my suggestions. And so far in the videotape, I have three. One is to talk about why it's important. Two is to talk about how to do it. And then three is the first hack of my online video. But I think at the end, I'll have an online video and a text. I think it's very important to have a text on this one. So with that, I turn over to you. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, that was that was excellent. I have a question. So let's say somebody comes to you and says they want to develop a bio primarily for relationship. Let's say they are single, okay, and they come to you. How would this help them? So one case would be somebody who's single, like you mentioned, like Match.com, right? And then the other one would be, let's say after they develop the relationship, they are happy, hopefully. They were saying, well, I would like to now also use the same. How do you use the same bio to help you with your business or at work?
I don't know that it's the same bio. I think the common element there is, my guess is there's some similarities in the four attributes, which is the passion, the talent, the experiences and skills. The experiences and skills may actually differ, right? And then the core values definitely should be consistent across. So if my niece comes to me and she's looking for a permanent relationship, I will have her do it in terms of, I am a woman in my 50s seeking a permanent relationship of quality and mutual respect, for example, right? And I am mature. I like to travel. And then she would say, her passions is she loves to travel and read. I'm just making this up. And then her talent, maybe she's excellent at listening to people and to have empathy. And then going down to experiences, because it's a relationship, she still need to say, I'm an IT manager at a top 10 bank in the world. And then my core values are family, success, and health, So you can see right away that the passions may be similar, in that she may be 50-year-old woman. She doesn't need to say that, with substantial business experience, seeking to maybe leverage it into her own entrepreneurial. I'm just second. So that's transferable. And her talents are listening to people and being empathetic, definitely transferable. Her experiences and skills, that might be uh, some transfer, because she may be able to maintain long-term relationships, but there may be new ones, such as system design, you know, um, travel around the world to manage a team of 150 people. And her core values are, again, success, health, and family. You know, she may talk about a little bit more about her success, the factors for her success, of what's important in her success. Is it money? Is it power? Is fame? So it's kind of like a fan. All those books are there, but you might be opening one up a little more than the other. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, you did. The thing that maybe I didn't ask it properly is there are certain, I hate to use the word core because you already have core values. So in a bio, there are certain things that are core that like I don't know,
Foundational.
foundational. Like I was thinking in terms, since we're both in IT, like object oriented technology, where certain things you kind of subsume, right? Like some basic things you have, then you add more depending on how do you use it for different situations. So for example, for business, your core could be your passion, and certain things you suppress because it's in a different situation. So what I think what I'm getting into is that once you have your bio, and I think this may be outside the scope of this particular discussion, is how do I now take this and apply it to different situations? That's what I was trying to get to. And maybe if it's outside the scope of what you're trying to do in this video, then that's fine. Because I think in this video, you're just trying to come up with the bio, and I'm trying to take it to the next level and saying, okay, I got the bio, but now let's say I'm in a social situation, which ones do I suppress and which ones do I emphasize? And when I'm in a business situation, which ones do I lead with and which ones do I completely remove?
Mhm.
Because it may not be appropriate. I don't need
Right,
to give you, like,
right.
I don't need to tell you about my interest because it's not appropriate. It's a business setting. But as far as my experience might suddenly become more important. So you got to juggle it around. Like I think that's probably something maybe you may want to get into on applying. Like, let's say once you already have your bio and you can say, okay, now if I'm in a business situation, I'm not going to lead with these things because they may not be appropriate. People don't care about my passion, and it's like outside, it's not relevant. And it's application of the bio. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yes, actually, the bio itself is pretty topical to the goal, to the theme. So I think, in my work here, I am creating a bio as if though I'm an entrepreneur. And so that's focused on work. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think, to me, is for some of us, and I think you're very unnatural at it, but for most of us mere mortals, having a bio um, gives me direction, like what I want to say and what's important to me. The next one is create. So I actually have a four-step process. Is finding the identity, and then finding the strengths and talents, and that's the first thing. The second one, by the time you're doing the bio, is creating the message, or a message. And then the third one is how to apply that message in different contexts. So the way I see it is that actually each of those can be a workshop, finding your key identity for those goals, creating that bio, that message, whether it's a video or a text. And then third one is taking that bio apart, right? Deconstructing it for different situations. That's a third workshop in my mind. And finally, as you say, it's a living document. So maintenance, keeping that together, uh, because the bio will inform your projects, and your projects will inform your bio. So it's a constant loop. So in my mind, it's a four-step process. And each one of them is on the wheel. So you can start anywhere because you're going to be constantly looping through. So it's creating an identity, creating an appropriate message based on that identity, applying that identity and the messages in real life situations, and then maintaining all those things. So I'm envisioning this being a 4-step workshop that we can put together.
Right, right. A quick question, because I think we may be going a little longer. Because,
We have 1 more minute.
yeah, because one of the things that I think one time we had discussed a while back, what I used to call it like pocket full of speeches, and which each of those things that you identified, like as far as your interests, like you might have several interests. I think you mentioned several of them that you had uh, different interests. Each one you should have something to talk about, like develop a speech around each of those interests. Because sir, if there's a commonality, then that's the one you lead with, because that's something that's going to resonate with the other person. Maybe in your case, it might be some of the certificates you have received for doing some Eastern meditation or something like that, where you have some certificate that might resonate with somebody, but it may not resonate with somebody who has no interest in that. So anyway, uh, those are the things that
Yes,
I think we need to
yes.
expand on. That each of those interests, there's a lot more. You got to go deeper into each one. It's not just like I have an interest, but that's fine. But if you can't talk about it in a little bit more depth, then it doesn't go anywhere. You're not going to be able to connect with somebody. Like in my case, I have interest in golf, so I should have something to talk about. So it's already ready when I'm meeting somebody. I don't have to suddenly start thinking like, yeah, no, I like golf too. I once played there. You should have certain things to talk about. Anyway, any closing thoughts? That was excellent. I think there's a lot we can, and obviously you're continuing your series, so we're going to be talking more about this as you work on more videos.
Yes. In computer assistant design, we have this concept of reusability and modularizing it. So what you're saying, in my mind, is a way of modularizing um, the
Yeah,
file into snippets. And I think one of the nice things that we can do because of the nature of the technology is to do 90-second introductory speeches, perhaps after that, we can do role playing, which is the third workshop, applying it in the real life situations. I think obviously, people may go to networking, but we can't follow them there. However, we can do role playing and we can do storylines. So that's how I see the third segment being done.
right. And okay, yeah. So at this point, yeah, I think those are all wonderful ideas, and we can certainly discuss that and see how we can develop this to help. Because I think it's a good exercise even for yourself to do. Because and you need to take a break for something. Okay, go ahead. So
After you wrap this up,
yeah,
are you
so
wrap?
yeah, so thanks a lot. And at this point, like I said, this is going to be a continuing series, but I highly recommend you watch these videos and start thinking about it. Okay, it's these things you have to start thinking about it, and Julie's going to help us using herself as an example, how you start with the top and then get deeper into it. And you want to get deep, but not too deep, because otherwise you're going to end up boring somebody. So that's uh, so
It's a
there's a lot
good
of work here
point.
that is ongoing here that we all have to work on. Okay, so at this point I'm going to take a brief pause, and then we'll move on to the next segment.
Thanks, Jay.
We'll take a break here a little longer uh, to make sure that she doesn't lose her power in the middle of the segment.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live, episode number 55. And we're moving to our second segment. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. In the second segment, it's sort of like, I don't know, I'm calling this a video series or not, but it's something that I have done previously. And I believe this is a very important topic when it comes to improving a skill. And and it's feedback. You can't improve unless you're getting feedback. But today I'm going to talk about, last week in episode 54, I talked about why it's important for you to become good at giving yourself feedback. Self feedback is very important because it's hard to find people who are really good at this. And they need to know a lot in order to provide feedback. And a lot of times their feedback is not really feedback, it's opinion. Feedback is how what you do and how they could make an improvement. So I'm going to give an example today on discuss it like if you have to give a feedback. So let's say I'm giving feedback. I'll use Julie as an example. If I had to give a feedback. So let's say Julie came to me and said, Jay, I just gave my speech. Can you give me a feedback? What would I do? Now, in Julie's case, I know her, so I would give her feedback because we have a different relationship. But even there, I have to be careful. Okay, so I just want to make sure just because you know somebody doesn't mean, because a lot of times you know your family members and they don't take feedback well. Okay, so I don't want to. But in Julie's case, we're specifically geared towards improving, so it's a different situation. But still, you have to be careful. Feedback is very tricky. Okay, people take it very personally, and they want to improve, but they also want to be accepted the way they are, and that's the paradox there, right? That how do you get around that, and that's there. There's nothing you can do about it. So let's say I didn't know Julie, and Julie asked me for a feedback, and she gave her speech. I would basically just ask her. I said, Julie, so tell me what you think you did well, and she'll say I did, A, B, and C. And I would just basically tell her exactly that I completely agree with you. All of those points you made, I agree with you. And I wouldn't add anything new to it. Now, that's me. I'm not saying other people could be different, but I need to know that if those three things she thinks are good and I think those are the right ones, even if I didn't, I need to stick to that. Because here's the thing. When people are asking for a feedback, they're not really asking for a feedback. You got to really know them well, and it has to be very contextual when it's feedback. You have to know whether they can actually even receive it, and you don't know that, right? I don't know that. So but they're not really asking for a feedback. What they're asking for is like, hey, can you validate what I just did? And that's exactly what I did. I validated it. And you know what? That's the feedback they really wanted anyway. Okay, because when you do something, you want to be accepted. So first thing is make sure that you accept that person for who they are. But again, even if the person asks for a feedback, you shouldn't give a feedback, because feedback, I believe, should cost you things. Because if I have to really know you well to give you feedback, I need to know whether you're really serious enough to take the feedback. So let's say if Julie has hired me as a coach and I'm giving her feedback, at that point, I would again use the same technique. I'd say, Julie, so tell me the three things that you think you did well in the speech. And she'll point out A, B, and C. And all I have to do is come up with one thing only, okay? Because I'm not looking for her to completely change her. Everybody wants to change other people into the way they want them to be. That's not what I'm trying to do. When the person is asking for feedback, you have to look at it realistically. The realistic improvement can be very small. We can't just suddenly go from being, speaking like totally scared to sounding like Bill Clinton. That's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen. So you can't suddenly say, let me make him into Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Oprah Winfrey. It's just not going to happen. You have to look at where they are and see what is realistically possible for that person to make a slight improvement. Slight improvement is a big improvement, actually. So I would ask her A, B, and C. I would pick two of them and give that as the top two, and then I'll include mine as the third one. So I tend to use my formula that I call the hedge ox, or the 60-30-10. And I weight like that because I've noticed in life there is no always one thing that matters. And some people will only one thing matters. I think everything has a weight. They're never equal, by the way. It's like everybody says, no, they're all equally weighted. I don't believe that. That's my belief. That's my philosophy, that everything is not equally weighted. Something at the top has to be more than the second and the third, right? And if you ever look at history with cars or anything, the top dog is always has a higher percentage than the second and then the third. If it doesn't, eventually it'll get to that point, right? There's some formula there. I forgot what it's called. Somebody once pointed out with cars, at one time you had General Motors, Ford, and AMC, and they all had similar, those type of percentages, something like that. And that way, I'm using the 10% is the feedback that I would include, one item that the person may not have included as the top three, A, B, and C. So I will replace C with D. That's it. And if I can get that person to at least focus on that, then I'll be happy, because I'm not saying that that person didn't do anything well, but if I give her something completely different and saying, oh, those three were excellent, but here's another three that I have come up with, at that point, that person's going to be completely confused. Julie would be completely confused. Like, wait a second, what about the three that I have? She has to work on that. And then I can add, well, there's one other thing you may want to look into. So she feels like, hey, I can do that. I could work on that. And getting even 10% improvement is a tall order. Just ask yourself, how often do you make that much of an improvement in anything? It takes a lot of time. So why are you trying to give the feedback which is so unrealistic that everybody wants to be aspirational, but it's not, doesn't work. That's what I'm trying to get to. So anyway, Julie has some thoughts on this. So Julie, what do you think? How do you give feedback where you want to help, but you also have to be realistic? That are you really helping, or are you actually going to make the person even more confused, and it doesn't really, that's why I say most of the time it's better not to give any kind of feedback, just kind of validate the person, because that's what the person is looking for. What technique do you use when people ask you, Julie, can you give me a feedback? Now, don't count me, because I specifically ask you for feedback. I'm talking about people that you don't know, or even people you know, but you don't know how well they really receive feedback. And because, I keep asking you, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? Because we've done this for so many times. So you and I don't count, because we practice, we're actually purposely practicing this. But I'm talking about people that are not practicing the way you and I are. How do you deal with that situation? You're muted.
Thanks, Jay. I actually really like this topic. And so what I got from it, just so that we're on the same page, is that don't give too much feedback. And if they don't pay you, don't give them anything, because if it takes you said feedback should cost people money, and what I got out of it is they need to be investing in the feedback, otherwise it's a waste of your time and their time, or whoever's giving the feedback. And what I also got out of it is, for you, the pay and not pay are very similar, except at the end, the 10%, and that you believe people can only make incremental change. I really need to think about this money thing. I wholeheartedly agree that unless people are invested in making the change, it's a waste of my breath. Actually, they could take it as they could be offended by it. And I, as you know, have a tendency to give too much feedback, as I am tendency to be too helpful. So I really need to think about that. Some of my tricks for giving feedback or creating a relationship where feedback is possible is I actually just listen to people, and then I think I need to switch that. I generally mirror something back to people, and sometimes it's something they know they have, but they might not share with other people, or sometimes it's something they don't even know they have. And I think I need to pull back a bit. But what that does in listen, I think, as you said in other meetings, being able to listen really deeply and sincerely and pay attention is already a great gift. And so I think I could practice that more these days, and I'm looking to change based on your speech, is I tend to mirror back people first to making sure there's a bond before I even if they're asking me for, especially if they ask me for feedback. But even if they don't ask me for feedback, the conversation is basically investigative, finding out who they are, what they're about. At some point, if I want to pass something on to them, I will do something I call deep mirroring, in the sense that I name an attribute I think they have that might not even be in the context of superficial level of the discussion. Because as you said, I want the information to go deeply into their consciousness. Um, and I think so that's how I do it. I tend to listen, mirror, and then affirming them more, even more than validating what they're saying, affirming their being on some level. And then if there's still a connection there, I may give some feedback. But even then, I think it's too much. On a separate note, I like the idea of what you say about giving them 10%. There's a old saying about the blue ocean and the red ocean, or the 80-20%, that if you're already getting 80% of your revenue from marketing, you want to go out, you might want to look at manufacturing or strategy, because you've already sucked the blood out of marketing. So you want to focus on something that you haven't looked at, because that's where the potential improvement can be quantum. So in a sense, you're absolutely right that they can only make tiny change. But I think when you're looking at the 10%, a tiny change can bring quantum results. And a friend of mine, she used a quote, and within 2 months, she tripled and quadrupled her revenue. So I'm sure you're right that the coach only made her make very tiny incremental changes, but the impact was really great. So as a coach, I think we need to look at where they can make the change, but also look at where the benefits coming from before we make that 10%. So that's why I think. Thanks for letting me talk out loud.
No, I think you gave a lot of stuff here that I need to change my wording around. So let me just clarify one thing that you brought up. This money. I want to use money in quotes. Okay, I'm not talking about actual transaction. For example, giving a feedback to you, it's costing you something. That's what I mean. See, you're putting your time, you're investing your time being on the show. So that is costing you. There is a money, even though it's not like you're paying me physically, like, okay, Jay, I'm going to send you a check for, I think I'm worth a lot, $1,000, let's say. But you are investing your time, right? You're investing your time, which is somehow, if you translate it, it costs, there's some money, there's other things you could do. So it is costing you. When you get on the show, there is a cost element involved here. When I was saying about the physical cost is that if somebody wanted to, like in your case, the cost is that you're putting your time. So that's a cost. But let's say if some people out there, you don't know and they want to come, by cost, I mean that the feedback they would get, like seminars are a perfect example. People pay a lot for seminars because at that point, they know exactly that they're going to get a feedback from an expert. If they came to your seminar, it's going to cost them, because that's the kind of feedback that they're paying to get that feedback. That's why that's what I mean by money. That's why people attend. So you have to ask yourself, when you go to a seminar, you're going specifically because you want some kind of a feedback. And if I was conducting a seminar, the realistic feedback that I could possibly give is to look for just a 10, because there's a lot of investment of time, energy, and effort involved in giving people feedback. The other thing that I'll mention, when you talk about mirroring, that you tend to mirror, I think mirroring is good the way you do it. I think elaborate a little bit. You may want to elaborate a little bit more, like saying, Jay, I think you said this, and then I think you do it well. I think you already have this technique down, and then say, yeah, this one, I agree with this. This one works well. Yes, you add more to it. So it's not just you repeating it like I heard you, which is important. So there are two parts to this, which maybe you can expand it in one of your videos if you want. That there's an art of mirroring, right? Because when you're giving a feedback, you can use the mirroring technique where you say, yes, you said those three things, that these are the three things. And then you go and add more to it. Yes, when you said that you are very expressive, I completely agree. So the person now feels like, yes, she not only heard me, but she's taken it a little bit deeper. And that makes that person become even more attentive for what you're saying. And you're actually even validating that person even more, saying, wow, I didn't know. Because when you sometimes say things that I say and you pick it up, it makes me feel good. Because like, wow, Julie heard it. I got it. It does make people feel good when you are mirroring what they're saying. But I think that when you take it to a level deeper, it makes them feel like, wow, that she completely gets me. And I think that's a good technique. And that's exactly what I was telling you right there. Because sometimes mirroring to me comes across as like, okay, let me just repeat the three things she said. I think that's fine, but I think you got to take it deeper than that. And lastly, the thing about when it comes to giving feedback, you want to find out whether the person actually has the self-awareness or the self-knowledge before you can give a feedback. Otherwise, your feedback is just not going to be that useful. That person doesn't have the self-knowledge. Like I know you do. You have the self-knowledge and the self-awareness. So my feedback is going to be somewhat considered. There will be some coming back in response. Jay, that's good. So because if I give you a feedback immediately, if you're receiving it, you have to come back to me and saying, oh, can you elaborate more? Can you elaborate more? You got to challenge me with that feedback for make it for me to know that you're actually taking it and there is something that you still have questions about it, so that I feel good that, hey, my feedback was considered. Not that you have to apply it, but at least you're not thinking about it. So it's a really hard thing when you talk about feedback that you and I don't think anybody talks about feedback the way you and I are talking about it. This is like really deep and it's very important. So let me have your closing thoughts and then we'll close out this show because I think it has gotten a little longer than we planned. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that everything that seems simple, but when you dig into it, the whole universe comes to us. So I encourage you to do more vids on feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason why, I have to admit, the reason I do these videos is because I have a problem. I'm not doing it to tell people like, hey, here's what, because if I didn't have a problem, because I haven't figured this out yet. So part of my doing this video is that I struggle with this. Otherwise, if I wasn't struggling with it, then I don't know if I would make this video. It would be more like, hey, look, I figured it all out. I don't. Nobody's figured this out, by the way, okay? Because you don't know people when you're giving them a feedback. I'm just trying to figure out that how to, at some point, people are going to think that we know what we're talking about. And we have to be careful that maybe we don't. Maybe we think we may know, but we really don't. And when you're giving feedback, you got to be careful. So I'm struggling with this, and that's one of the reasons why I like to have these kind of discussions with you on that. Okay? So at this point, any closing thoughts on the show or anything? Or I think this was a pretty lively show. We had a lot of good discussions on two segments. As you can see, we stretched it out close to an hour.
Yes, great show again, and I apologize if I took longer than I did. I did keep a segment on the time, but I'll be a little more careful.
No, the time is not important. Like I said, what's important is that it has value.
Yeah, so I think that was great.
I'm not counting on like, okay, it has to come, because we don't have any commercials here to do. So we're not doing for the commercials. We're doing it out of really, out of love and help that it can help people, and we want to show them that we care about them. All right, so at this point, let's close out the show. So I want to thank all of you for watching, and like I said, you are how you speak, and as you can see, you need to speak about something, right? And today you just saw an example of that, where Julie has started her video series. She's actually in the middle of it, where she is now using her skills, speaking skills, to get deeper into other aspect of it. So what she wants to talk about is this whole uh, health, happiness, and success. That whole video series, and at some point you have to bring it out to people. So that's where you need your speaking skills. So there's an example of how you can do something similar, whether it's in technology, marketing, sales, etc. Find a topic and develop a video series around it. This is pretty advanced actually, but this is what you have to do as you get beyond, like in my book I write, from confident speaking and beyond. And that's where Julie is now. She's beyond that now. She's getting into that territory. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. And thank you for watching. We will see you in the next show, episode number 56. And that's the wrap.